Welcome back to Learning with Merit. Today we are going to talk about how to get started with Git and GitHub. So if we take a look down here at what our goals are, we want to figure out how to download and install Git, how to create a GitHub account and our first repository, how to create SSH keys for passwordless authentication, and some Git commands for how to get started. First things first, let's take a look at how we might download Git. So we go to Google, we type Git with an I, and we will find something that looks like this. We click on Git. You can read a little bit about Git, but basically it is a version control type software. And what it allows us to do is we are able to collaborate on code. We are able to make sure that we have sort of steps in our code that we could revert back to if we needed to. It just sort of makes it easier to work with your code and different versions. So if we click on downloads here, we come over here, we find there is Windows, Mac, and Linux. We can download for Windows. You click on the click here to download. It will take you through, once you click on this executable, it will take you through a process. Basically, you're going to leave everything on the default unless you know exactly what you're doing. Default will be just fine for getting started. Alright, once you have it downloaded, you should be able to find something called Git Bash. So you can go down here to your search bar and type out Git Bash, and you will see this right here. We are going to use that in just a second, so make sure that you can find it. For GitHub, GitHub is the online way that we store all of our code. So we have Git, which we could use totally independent of GitHub, but GitHub provides us sort of an on-the-cloud way to store and share code. And so a lot of people will use it. You can click the sign up button right there. I'm going to go ahead and sign in because I already have an account to do this with. And if GitHub doesn't crash my machine here, we will be able to get started. Once you get signed into GitHub, what you will be greeted with is a page that looks like this. So you've got a lot of stuff going on, but there are several places we can create a repository. It defaults to private on this, so you could create one right here, or you can click over here and create one. Let's click over here and create one. There are other settings, so we've got this little sidebar here, and of course we've got another sidebar over here, which is going to come up in just a second. So we click on Create Repository, and we need to give it a name. Let's call it, whoops, make sure I type it right, First Repo. And it checks if it's available, and it's all under your username, so pretty much whatever you come up with should work there. We're going to leave everything else on default and click Create Repository. So now we're greeted with this page, which is actually kind of helpful. It gives you the code, basically the commands you want to start with, and we're going to go with SSH. But before we can really do the SSH thing, we need to go and actually create some keys that we can use with SSH and then with our GitHub account. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to our search bar. We're going to type in Git Bash. You should see the app pop right up. Hit enter on that. Alright, we're going to type pwd first. That gives us our working directory, our present directory. And you'll see we are in the C drive under users, under my username, which is Learning with Merit here. And this is the folder that we are in. We can type ls to list all of the files and folders that are here. Of course, there are several. It doesn't even actually show everything that's here. To show everything, I need to type ls-la. It shows everything, but of course with a lot more jumbled information. Right, and I like all of this over here too. But you'll see there's a directory that we need called .ssh, and it is not in here. So we're actually going to have to create that directory first. So we're going to come down here, I'm going to type clear. We're going to say mkdir for make directory.ssh. Then we'll do ls-a. This lists all without all the jumble stuff, and now we see .ssh right there. So now we have that directory. Type clear again. Now we need to start creating some stuff for that directory. So we need several things. We're going to need the keys. The keys are basically, we have a public and a private key. And the way that it works is in public key cryptography, we have those two keys. The public key is the one that we give to everyone else to send us messages. And the private key is the one that we keep hidden, that no one ever sees but us. And so the security of this relies on the security of your private key. So why do we not need passwords when we use SSH? Well, I can prove with that private key because I'm the owner of the private key. In fact, whoever owns that private key is the owner of the private key, right? So that private key is sort of like your identity. You want to make sure that you protect that private key so that you can prove in the future that you are who you say you are and get to make changes to things. If you're interested more in this type of cryptography, in fact, we use this quite a bit, you can look up RSA, literally RSA. That's one of the schemes that they use. You can look up public key cryptography. You can look up asymmetric encryption. These are all things that can be associated with what we're doing here today. So what we're going to do is we are going to create some keys. So we are going to say SSH-keygen. Like that. Going to add the -T flag, then ED25519. That is a specific encryption type algorithm there. You can look that up if you're interested. And then we're going to use our email that we use to sign up with GitHub. In this case, learningwithmerit@gmail.com. I cannot wait for the spam emails now that people can see that on the internet. We'll hit that. It says it's generating the public-private key pair. And now it wants us to know where to save the key. Well, I want to save it in the .ssh directory, and I want to give it a specific name. In this case, because it's GitHub, I want to call it GitHub. And then I want to, just for my sake, remember what algorithm we're using here. So I did that. It will ask for a passphrase. If you want to protect it with a password, you can. Do not have to. You can just hit enter twice like that. It gives us a couple things. This right here is a hash, a SHA-256 hash or SHA if you prefer. You should look those up and what they are. They are very useful. It's one of the ways we actually store passwords without actually storing the password itself. So it's an interesting thing to look up if you don't already know. So once we get this, it looks like we're working out all right. The next thing that we need to do is we need to start our SSH agent. So we're going to say eval. We're going to open our quotes, put a $, then a parentheses. We'll say SSH-agent-s. Make sure there's a space there. Close parentheses and close quotes, just like that. And you'll see that it gives us an agent PID for process ID, and that's good. That means we know that we've started it. The next thing that we need to do is we need to add our key that we just created to the agent. So we've actually created a public and private key pair. So I'm going to type clear here. I'm going to change my directory to the .ssh directory. I'm going to type ls, and you'll see that we have one that says pub and one that says nothing after it. Okay. So the one on the right that says pub is our public key. That's the one we can give out to anyone, right? The one on the left is our private key, and that is the one that you don't want to share with anyone. For example, if I were to expose that here, that would be bad because now anyone could arguably be me based on that private key information. So we need to keep that safe. So let's add our key here to our SSH agent. What we're going to do is we are going to type ssh.add, or -add, excuse me. Then we need the path to that file. So tilde indicates our home directory, so Learning with Merit. So I'm just going to type that instead of having to type out the full thing. Then .ssh /, and in this case we want the GitHub personal, which I hit tab right there. That's how it filled for me. And so there is our private GitHub key. So we've added that. And it's added the identity to our agent, so we're doing just fine there. We're going to cat the public key here. So cat means to concatenate, but really what it's going to do is we're going to read it out to us on the screen. So I want the public key this time, not the private key. There's my public key. And so we're going to grab that. Right, and you can copy that if you want. We're going to go over here to GitHub. Scroll up, find our little user icon thing up there. Go to Settings. Go down to SSH and GPG keys. New SSH key. Title, we're going to call this one Personal. I'm just going to paste it right there and add that SSH key. So now there's a public key there that I can use to get access to my repositories. So now that we've got that going, I'm going to go back here, go back to Home, go back to my repo so that I've got this information waiting on me as I need it. The next thing we're going to do is go back to Git here. Now that we've got that added to our agent, we need to make sure that we actually have it working. So I'm going to type SSH add like that, -L, -E, and then SHA256. And here we see it has been added. Otherwise, you will get a different output. All right. So now we're going to test it and see if it actually works. So we're going to say SSH -T git at github.com. It's going to ask me, I'm just going to say yes. And if you get this, it should say hi and then your username. You successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shell access. So we've done everything right so far. We do need to add a couple of things. So we're going to clear this out. Type ls so you can see what we're working with. I'm going to add a configuration file. So I'm going to say nano config, just like this. So what this is doing, nano is a command line, which is what we're on, a command line text editor. Config is the name of the file that I want to edit. Now, config doesn't exist, as you can see up here. It does not exist. I'm actually creating it and writing to it right now. So we're going to type host. We're going to call this personal. In the next line, we're going to say host name. That's github.com. We need to give it an identity file, so we'll say identity, file. Give it a path, so tilde to the username, and it's .ssh / not config, but github _ in this case, we want the private key. So it's 25519 like that. We'll add identities. Only yes. Like that. Now we're going to save that. You'll notice that Nano does not allow you to use your fancy little, the only thing I can really do is highlight with this. I can double click and do all kinds of stuff, but I can't move my cursor around. So you have to use your arrow keys and you have to read the stuff down here. Everywhere where you see an up arrow, that means use the control button. So to exit, I need Control X. So I'm going to say Control X like that. And hopefully it saved it for us. Let's check again. Yeah. So if I changed something, which I'm not really changing anything here, and I hit Control X, it'll say Save Modified Buffer. I hit yes. And then it says file name to write, config. I like that. There's fine. So we'll hit there and we're good. So now we have a configuration file that's hooked up to that. Now comes the more sticky part when it comes to setting up Git stuff. We're going to actually create a Git repository here locally and connect it to the one on GitHub. So we're going to cd. We're just going to type cd here. Hit enter. Then what we are going to do is we are going to change directories to the desktop. You can of course stick this wherever you want, but I like the desktop. And then I am going to make a directory, and we're going to call this particular directory GitHub, just for good measure. Then I'm going to change directory to GitHub. Alright, so now we're here. What you'll notice if you look back at GitHub is they give you some actual things to do. So we're going to do these steps and see how they work out for us. So the first thing we're going to do is echo first repo, just like that. We're going to send that into the readme.md. That is a markdown file. So do that, and that creates, see, that creates a readme file right there. If I cat it, you'll see that it has first repo in it. So we'll clear that out. So now we need to initialize, so we're going to say git init. It initialized an empty Git repository sitting right there in this directory that we're in, the current directory that we're in. Right. We are going to do a couple of configuration things. So we're going to say git config -- global user.email, and then in parentheses here we're going to provide our email, the one we signed up to GitHub with. Then we're going to use up arrow to save ourselves a bunch of writing. We are going to come back here and change user.email to user.name. And then we're going to give it a name we want it to have us go by. I'm going to go with LWM. Now that we got the configuration stuff out of the way, we can continue. We're going to say git add. That's going to add everything that we've changed. So in this case, it's only a readme file, but it's going to add everything that we changed. It's going to give us a little warning that it'll fix and deal with later. Then we need to commit it after we've added it. So we're going to say commit. I'm going to use -m because you have to give a message. You want to have a good message here. In this particular case, we're just going to say first commit. Okay, and it'll see one file changed, one insertion. We're doing good so far. Now we need to, we're going to change the name of the branch. Now usually this would be master, but they've mostly changed it so far to be main. So we're just going to leave that alone. They do actually have change it from master to main on here. If we take a look right here, because it's usually defaulted to master, they want you to change it to main to be in line with GitHub. But since we're already main, there's no reason for us to do that. Alright, the next thing we want to do is we need to add our remote repository. So we're going to say git remote add origin. And we're going to need this right here, and make sure that it is SSH because we're using SSH this time. So we're going to take that right there and make sure that we type it out right now. It's often better to just copy it and then come over here and paste it, because oftentimes you will mistype it. So copy and paste will do you a lot of good on that. So once we do that, if we want to check, we can say git remote -v, and we can see that that is set up like we want it to be. I'm going to type clear here. All right, the next thing for us to do is to type git push -u origin and then main. And if you see that, you've done everything correctly. So what it's done is it's updated everything, and we should be good to go now. Right now it's not going to work because they haven't really updated anything outside of this, but if other people were working on it and you needed to update your local version, you would say git pull. Right? And what I got is already up to date because it's already working out there. All right. So we set up everything with GitHub here. Now we have something we can work on locally, and then we can update on GitHub. If we look now right here, so if I reload the page, you will see that it has updated on GitHub. We have our first repo with a README file that says first repo in it. And you'll notice it doesn't have the little hashtag that I put on there, and that's because in a markdown file like this, you see there it is right there. The markdown file gets translated into this stuff right here. If you're interested in GitHub Markdown, you should look that up. It'll explain to you what's going on there. Effectively, I just made a heading by using that hashtag. All right, I hope that you learned something. This is certainly an endeavor when I learned it the first time, and I hope that I helped you learn it in a quicker and more concise way, exactly what you have to do to make everything work. Appreciate your time, and thank you for watching Learning with Merit.